Hi, good morning. Thank you, Rebecca. I really appreciate it. My name is David Pegos. I'm a special assistant with the California Department of Food and Agriculture. I'm pitch hitting for Mr. Nick Condos this morning, our director of our Plant Health Division. He got a scheduling conflict, and so you get the B team today with the European Grapevine Moth presentation. However, I was boots on the ground and very familiar with this program, so I should be able to relay all the information on the program. So I'm going to go through and start talking about the European Grapevine Moth Eradication Program and the formula for success of the eradication project here in California. So I'm going to provide a little background about our pest prevention system here. And hold on one sec. I'm just trying to, having a bit of a difficulty. One second. All right, sorry about that. I'm a little technically challenged, so thank you, Amber, for your help. So here at the California Department of Food and Agriculture, our mission here is to protect ornamental plants and native habitat as well as agricultural crops from harm caused by invasive species. So pretty much we're here to protect our natural resources and agriculture here in California. Our state statutory authority and legislative intent, Health and Pest Prevention Services mission is legislative mandated by our Food and Agriculture Code here in California to protect ornamental and native plants as well as agricultural crops that may be harmed by invasive species. The legislature enacted mandates also recognize that the pest prevention system is uniquely positioned to protect California's urban and natural environments as well as its agriculture. You can see a plethora of different invasive species that impact us here in California. So how does a fully functioning and robust pest prevention system benefit other agencies? So we maintain the authority and the expertise on pest prevention systems. However, partnering with other agencies, for example, on some hydrilla eradication projects in our Great Delta that we have here in California. We have other partners such as Boating and Waterways who have interest in clearing the waterways and potentially funding as well through DWR, Department of Water Resources. And so that's kind of how we all benefit from this, because we have the authority to move forward and eradicate. Boating and Waterways has the interest to support those efforts, and Department of Water Resources has the resources of the funding to make the project happen. And so it's just one example of some of the collaboration here in California on our pest prevention system. And again, I'm just going to go over the pest prevention system very generally and then to start zeroing in on the European grapevine moth specifically. So one of the big important factors here, because we have 38 million folks here in California, is our partners and trying to get from the county, state, and federal levels. On our federal side, we partner with the United States Department of Agriculture, of course, and APHIS typically, but we also work with many other foreign FSA and Ag Research Services, as well as others. Customs and Border Protection is another partner of ours that works on the international ports of entry and helping us keep things out in the first place, and I'll go over that in a second. And then the U.S. Forest Service, due to things like shot-hole borer that we have here, gold-spotted oak borer, sudden oak death, things that would affect our urban and rural forests, but also our landscapes within urban areas. And then, of course, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, we focus on interstate and local activities. And the agricultural interest groups contribute to the pest prevention system by funding activities such as watercraft inspections at our border stations and detection surveys for aquatic weeds like hydrilla, like I kind of alluded to earlier. And then agricultural interest groups, these primarily focus on pests of a specific concern to a commodity group. For example, European grapevine moth, right? It impacted wine grape, table grape, and raisin production. And so all those commodity groups all joined together to help us with this effort. Another example would be like the Asian citrus psyllid and Wong Long Bing, where the citrus industry has stepped up to help us on that one. And then the county agricultural commissioners here in California, all the counties have an agricultural commissioner, and so they are invaluable to us at the state level for the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and at the federal level, because they are really got the local focus and can really with California being so diverse from the north of the state to the south of the state, there's different interest groups throughout the state, and so the agricultural commissions are really that local voice, and also help us. We contract with them on a number of trapping and eradication or control activities. And I'm just going to highlight one entity here in California, the California Environmental Protection Agency. We work with a couple of these entities, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and these are toxicologists that help us with questions from public. If we have to spray chemicals in folks' backyards, they help us develop Q&As and different informational pieces to provide to the residents or industry, as well as being a critical voice at public meetings. And I'll kind of go over the public meetings in a little bit later, but when we do a project, we notify everyone from the Congress, our state legislators, our state Senate, and our state assembly, as well as our county our county supervisors, city managers, as well as like county superintendent of public education, those type of folks, and we notify them of the find in the area. And then we hold a public meeting where we have partners such as a WEHA, which is the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessments, which are toxicologists to answer individual questions, or Department of Pesticide Regulation to ask about the formulation of chemicals and how they got authorized for use in California. Then we also have our staff there to address individual concerns or scheduling, trying to figure out when we can get access to their backyards, things of that nature. And we also have the County Agricultural Commissioner's Office represented as well. So these two entities, the WEHA and DPR, again, Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment and the Department of Pesticide Regulations, helps us to reduce our pesticide use, and so it's on best practices. They also, as I alluded to, provide questions and answers for us for individuals, so it's not coming from us, but it's coming from the experts, right? And I think that's a key component to our outreach. And then the public meetings, so after notifying all the elected officials, we then notify all the homeowners in the treatment area of a pending public meeting. We also provide a lot of information within the packet of information that they receive, as well as an 800 number, so if folks have any questions, they can always contact us. So this entity is pretty important to us here in California, and we partner with them pretty often. So some of the elements of the pest prevention system, and we'll go through some of these as they deal with the European grapevine moth, the exclusion or quarantine activities. These are external and internal exclusion activities designed to prevent the artificial movement of invasive species and respond to a timely manner to contain the spread of a newly detected pest. And all of these components were actually utilized in the European grapevine moth program, and we'll kind of go over each of these and how they tie into the European grapevine moth. The exclusion activities I'll go through here in a moment on the next couple slides. Detection, so we have a network, as all states do, detect early detection, what I call pest detectives out there, looking for pests with our traps on a grid pattern. That's always kind of a surveillance activities, and then once we find something, of course, we increase our trapping densities. Eradication, timely and effective eradication activities to eliminate the new pest infestation, and so that's what we undertook with the European grapevine moth. And then control and contain systems for plant pests that have been widely established. And so we actually utilize this as well as the European grapevine moth by using twist ties or mating disruption in between treatments. Identification is the accurate and timely pest identification. We can't move forward with a project unless we know exactly what the pest is, so that we can find solutions that will target that pest and mitigate any impacts on our local environment. Public outreach, that's really my specialty, is the outreach programs to enlist public support of pest prevention systems through enhanced public awareness and education. And so we do a number of different public outreach in addition to what I mentioned on the earlier about the public meetings. We also have presences throughout the state partnering with other agencies to educate folks about how we are out there preventing and protecting our agriculture and natural resources. I'm going to sneeze, excuse me. Then finally, the scientific support, research, information technology, pest risk analysis systems to ensure that the pest prevention program is relevant, scientifically based, and continuously improved. And so we work with, we create a technical working group, a TWIG, with the help of the feds and the state to create kind of a path forward and help guide the program so that we're using the principles of IPM on all our programs. So just quickly on our exclusion activities, California has got some unique topography, and that kind of provides our natural protections here in California. So we have our Sierra Nevada mountains and the Mojave Desert on the east side, and then the Pacific Ocean on the west side that helps protect us naturally. Pests are not inclined to fly over the Pacific Ocean or the mountains nor the desert for that matter, and so those are kind of a built-in natural protection. And then we augment that by our exclusion border stations. So we have interior border stations throughout the state here in California that monitor incoming traffic, and really, you know, I often have to educate a lot of folks about this program, because folks that have California plates often say, oh, they're not doing anything, they're just waving us through, but they're really targeting is vehicles from states that may harbor invasive species, the Asian longhorn beetle or emerald ash borer, things of that nature that we don't want here in California. And that would prosper, just like, you know, a lot of folks love to live here in California. The bugs get a foothold here, and they're going to take off and proliferate. And so that's what we're trying to avoid, is the establishment of these pests. So, you know, everyone agrees on keeping them out in the first place. Once they get here and how we deal with it, well, that's a totally different situation. But so this kind of lists all our border stations coming into California, and so we're really targeting is, again, you know, vehicles coming from certain states that may harbor invasive species that don't want here, but also nursery stock, commercial shipments, moving vehicles that might be moving residents from one location into California, and then pods. Pods has been a kind of a new emerging issue for us, where pods are these temporary storage boxes that a truck will come dump off. You got a couple weeks to kind of load it up, and then whenever you're ready, they'll come back, pick it up, and either put it in storage or deliver it for you somewhere. Problem with those are that sometimes they are left in back east somewhere, and perhaps in a gypsy moth area, and so the gypsy moth, as many folks on this call are well aware, would lay their eggs on the substrates of the pod surface, unbeknownst to the homeowner nor the transporter of the pods. And then say they're moving to California, so then those pods come through our inspection points, these border stations that I enumerated here, and then we thoroughly inspect those, and we found a number of rejectionable items on those pods. And so those have been of concern to us and a kind of emerging issue for us, and so we'll continue to work with the company to try to get clean pods coming into California. And then our other partners, as I alluded to earlier, are our federal partners at Customs and Border Protection. So we partner with them extensively, and so we have several international ports of entry that, as folks are aware on the call, that with more trade and travel, it's only going to increase invasive species impacts to our state. And so we have the San Ysidro land port and border crossing by San Ysidro by the Mexican border, and so that is, from my understanding, the busiest border crossing in the world. And so you can imagine what is coming through that port, right? We try to do the most efficient job as possible, but with so many individuals coming through, it's impossible to get everything. So we try to target and partner with them to do different outreach activities. For example, like Mother's Day, we'll target flowers coming across the border, or we constantly are on the lookout for nursery stock, that's specifically citrus nursery stock coming across the border, so that it's not harboring Asian citrusillid or an infected tree, something that may be infected with Honglong being, something along those lines. The San Francisco International Airport and the Los Angeles International Airport are obvious points of entry from international flights coming from the Pacific Rim, or it could be coming from other locations as well. It could be coming from Europe also. But you know, typically in California, we're in the dubious position of getting some of the first pests in the nation, and so it's always important for us to, again, try to exclude those pests from entering California in the first place. And then finally, our dog teams. So we have dog teams that work in our FedEx, UPS, United States Postal Service, looking for unmarked parcels of agricultural products that are coming through. And so we've had many successful detections, and the dog teams are wonderful. I can't talk enough about them. They're all rescue dogs as well, so they tell a great story, and they're just invaluable to our efforts of detecting some of these invasive species that are coming through parcels. And again, with more trade and travel, it's more important than ever that we're vigilant on this pathway for invasive species. And we found many different invasive species, from Asian citrusillid to Honglong nursery stock to, you know, you name it, it's come through the mail. And so again, the dog teams are invaluable. And just briefly going back to the international ports of entry, we also work with the beagles at those ports of entry. And just on a side note, we're also working on the Don't Pack a Pest effort with signage at all three of these international ports of entry, and we're partnering with Florida, Texas, Hawaii, and we look to expand that program elsewhere. So why are more pests becoming established in California? According to a recent study, that, you know, from about 20-year period, the annual rate of detection of established populations of invertebrates increased to 9 per year, about a 50% increase over the last 20 years. And again, you know, what do we attribute this to? More trade and travel, right? We have more cargo boxes coming in, more human beings traveling, as well as more parcels into our mail facilities. Approximately 44% of the non-native invertebrates likely arrived from populations established elsewhere in North America. The rest came from foreign countries through international ports or established. The rate of establishment has been unchanged by Customs and Border, after Customs and Border Protection took over exclusion responsibilities from USDA. And then the University of California, our Center for Invasive Species Research, estimates that the invasive species cost to California is over $6 billion per year. Pests are having a greater impact here in California. Negative impacts of invasive species in California is greater now than it was in the past because of the warmer climate. Has increased the value of urban and natural forests that sequester carbon, clean air, and save energy. Just kind of alluded to earlier. Just like a lot of folks like to come here and live in California, you can imagine if some of these pests get out here in California with the abundant sunshine and pretty nice weather year-round. Except this year we've had a lot of rain and actually flooding this year, but typically it's pretty nice out, and so they can just proliferate and take off here in California. The transition to permanent and high-value crops like almonds, walnuts, pistachios, wine grapes, citrus, due to consumer demand, reduced pest management options like pest-free periods or crop rotation that are available for annual crops. And then increase in the organic food production here in California. It's about 8% of our production, but it's growing to about 9 or 10% due to consumer demand. And again, we have about a $54 billion industry here, commodity industry. But then if you extrapolate that from all the seed salesmen, insurance salesmen, those types of things, it's about a $70, $80 billion a year operation. And so the organic food movement is a growing segment of that. However, the difficulty there is that there's fewer cost-effective pest management options in our tool chest because of the increasing number of crops, and so that's an ongoing issue of trying to find efficacious materials that will help us in our fight against invasive species. So then this is the last slide on the pest, and I'll get into more detail on the European grapevine moth program. And the increase in consumption of fresh, locally grown fruits and vegetables means a proportionally larger percentage of public's diet is susceptible to invasive species damage. Up to 60% of residents in areas infested with the Asian citrus psyllid and Honglong bean have at least one citrus tree. And so because we have to do visual surveys throughout the state, and so we are able to determine that about 60, almost 70% of properties have some type of citrus on them. And so that's why we're so concerned with the Asian concern. We have a $2 billion commercial industry here, but again, as you can look at these numbers, with 38 million folks, about 60–70% of them, I have a lemon tree that is just proliferating, just producing a ton of delicious lemons, and as well as many other individuals. And then the public increasingly objects to reactive responses to invasive species introduction, increasingly demands more preventative-based solutions, and so that's why we're trying to focus on the exclusion activities, do more education and outreach with our Don't Pack a Pest efforts. We also have a Buy It Where You Burn It campaign here to target the movement of firewood as a pathway for, we have a couple shot hole borers here in Southern California, the Prolifica shot hole borer and the Kuroshima shot hole borer, as well as the like I alluded to earlier, the sudden oak death, gold spotted oak borer, those type of pests that can be moved on firewood. And so again, we're trying to educate the traveling public and residents here in California what they can do to help prevent the use of chemicals within our environment and lower those amounts. And so trying to educate folks about not bringing things back with them when they travel, not mailing things into their family members here, have hopefully increased our commitment and compliance with the general public about not bringing things in. And California's increasingly important role in feeding the world and economic benefit to the state means that invasive species damage will be amplified as more people rely on California's agriculture and as a source of food and economic well-being. So California produces about 50% of the fruits, nuts, and vegetables for the United States of America, but then we also export ridiculous amounts of produce throughout the world. But for America, it's really a strategic resource that we have to protect at all costs, so we're not dependent on other countries for our food production. And those yields are only going to need to increase in the future. And so making sure invasive species stay out is of greater and greater concern. Okay, so we're going to talk about the European grapevine moth. I got a short video here. This is Greg Clark with the Napa County, and Napa County, for those that aren't from California, is our high-value wine production area. And so he's going to tell, this is an older video, but it really shows, and then I'll get into a lot of our activities, really shows the breadth of the infestations. These are after some treatments, but they'll show some shots of the European grapevine moth. I was actually at these sites when we were filming them, and it was just amazing to see the moth and then to see the commitment from the industry and the local community to really push back on the European grapevine moth. And again, it was obviously a successful program. See if this works. Knock on wood. Okay, great.
Nice fruit. So when we were out here last July, that was at the end of the second flight, we came out to what was going on, and that's what we're doing today. This is harvest. This is October 1st. It's just starting to pick. Those generations happen sometime by early September. Last year when we were out at this time, every bunch in this vineyard had botrytis, and these aren't really good examples, but this is kind of what it was, only worse. And when you broke these open, you would find 2, 3, 4 larvae in every cluster. So as you look out here, you have 11-acre vineyard with 12 clusters or more. That was a maggot-infested vineyard. And so when we came out in April of this year to see how many moths had emerged, moths were everywhere. It was beyond anything that I had ever seen and anything that any growers in this area had ever seen. It was just mind-numbing to see the pest population that we were looking to deal with for this coming year. Now we've come out, we're checking to see where we are at harvest. Are there any moths? Can we find Labiche out of here? And we've done all these applications of insecticide, the mating disruption, done some monitoring to see. He says bunch rot is almost impossible to find. Some of this other damage is sunburn when it got too hot a couple weeks ago. But you know, this is a completely different situation than it was last year. Last year there was no problem. This year, very hard commodity, a great crop of Chardonnay is coming out of here. What I was going to do was to take a look at some of these clusters that look like they have bunch rot and see if there's Labiche. Where there's bunch rot, there's Labiche. But what I see here is a little bit of bunch rot. I don't see any webbing from the larva. I don't see any larvae. I don't see any grass, insect droppings. I don't see cat skins. I don't see pupa. I don't see anything here that would lead me to believe there's any European grapevine moth here. And that's been consistent all year here. And because he was so successful in accomplishing what would appear to be eradicating this moth from this vineyard, the approaches that he used, the tools, the teamwork, everything that came into this really should be considered the model for addressing European grapevine moth when it's found. In order to ensure that this grower continues to have a bountiful harvest, not just this year, but years into the future, every grower needs to take the same measures that he's taken to successfully combat European grapevine moth. Not terribly complicated, but there's some key things that he did and that growers can do. And a lot of it centers around the mating disruption, properly timed materials. If the growers in this community and elsewhere where European grapevine moth follow these protocols, they're going to have this grower has, project has, and continue farming.
So I apologize if the sound on that was a little low, but I just wanted to really show the videos of the finds early on, and you can see the moth buzzing around. It was quite the sight, and we didn't really understand what was going on initially. So in October of 2009, the European grapevine moth was first detected in Napa County, and that's Gray Clark's district, or county there. The detection represented the first time the European grapevine moth was found in North America, and European grapevine moth proved itself to be a destructive pest for grapes in Europe and other countries, and so we were trying to learn from them. Pretty much a European grapevine moth feeds primarily on the grapevine flowers and hollows out the grape berries, and then leaving only the skin and seeds, and that's where the botrytis comes in, the fungus, and causes problems for production. A comprehensive eradication program was implemented through a cooperative program through the United States Department of Agriculture, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, local agricultural commissioners, local elected officials, industry, stakeholders, and the public. And so then we also extended quarantines throughout the California for impacted counties. But one thing I wanted to point out, though, is that in 2010, in our first full year of trapping, there were over 100,959 to be precise, in our first full year of trapping. and the vast majority of those were detected in Napa County. Over 100,831 of the European grapevine moth were detected in 2010. So we're looking at those numbers going, oh my goodness, what's going on here, right? But after the industry got engaged and we were working on time treatments as well as the mating disruption, as a result of the cooperative program, in 2012, only 77 European grapevine moth were detected in Napa County, and that's a 99% reduction in European grapevine moth detections since 2010. And so again, I just wanted to point out that the full breadth of this invasive species and the impacts to our, because it was commodity specific as well, really I think helped us on this project. So as I alluded to, the European grapevine moth is not native to California, and again, it's really the botrytis that is the main concern for our production. A couple of our vineyards were heavily impacted, and were forced to pretty much 11-acre field or a vineyard, and unfortunately that was a lost vineyard in 2009. They weren't able to garner any fruit from that vineyard. Finding it is we are lucky to have traps that were effective, and so that was one of the keys we believe to the successful eradication as well, was having lures and traps that were successful in finding the European grapevine moth, so that we could expand from 10 counties altogether were impacted down to pretty much just Napa and a little bit of Sonoma County for the last couple of years, just using twist ties and mating disruption until we were detection free for a couple of years. So the keys to successful eradication are the development of the cooperative plan, motivated and engaged stakeholders. Of course, in the Napa and Sonoma County, there's a lot of wine grape production, and they were all able to engage and come together because they saw the issues with this pest, and were just a powerhouse in helping make this happen. And then it was a publicly acceptable management option. So we, for growers would do their time treatments. We're Extension, University of California Cooperative Extension, and we have some stellar individuals there that were just beyond the call of duty for helping us with this pest. And they developed the time treatments, when the life cycle of the pest, figuring out when the perfect time to treat, and then working with grower liaisons in each county, we were able to get all the growers to treat at a similar time. And then in between those treatments, we used mating disruption. So on the industrial side, it was very successful and a lot of cooperation. It was in everyone's best interest to mobilize, and the grower liaisons were invaluable to helping communicate and help with the timing of those applications. On the residential side of the equation, we had a number of residents that were impacted, and that's always a difficult situation when we have to go in and spray chemicals. Fortunately for this pest, because it was such host specific, we had a couple of good tools in our toolbox. One was host removal. We could strip the fruit, and that would mitigate the life cycle for the European grapevine moth. But then also, if folks wanted to keep their grapes, and a lot of them do, they would be little backyard vineyards or a couple vines that folks go, oh, I use those and crush them and make my own little wine. And so there was a lot of those type of individuals as well, as you can imagine, in those regions. And so they had the option of maintaining or retaining their fruit as long as they treated with BT, or organically acceptable solution set. And so with the either fruit removal or the organic treatment options, the public was much more apt to be supportive of the program. So the European grapevine moth, again, it was all about the partnership and really all coming together. It was an amazing effort, and I can't compliment the industry for stepping up as much as they did. So that at the state level, again, we were working with the counties, the cities were all engaged and helpful, as well as the state and the federal government were all heavily engaged. And then the residential community in some of these wine growing regions understand where their local economy is based operative, and you know, of course, there's always some individuals that we would work with and kind of triangulate and educate them on why we're doing these activities. But the vast majority of the residents understood the severity of this, and like I alluded to, you know, back in 2009, we had 2 vineyards that were just pretty much that one vineyard you saw that Greg was at, that was ground zero for us. That vineyard lost, I believe, is about $8 million with that 11-acre field. And then there was another field that also was not able to. They actually went to production and tried to crush, but then the botrytis was such an impact on the wine product itself that it was not sellable, and they had to, the whole crop was a loss. And so that really, I think, awakened the industry as well, where they thought, oh, well, we might be able to just crush our way through this, but no, because of the botrytis, it was really affecting the quality of wine, and so that again really got the attention of the industry. And then other host areas, we had some riparian areas that were kind of tricky because we had some wild grapes growing along some local creeks and tributaries in the Napa region, and so those were really tricky on how we deal with those, and pretty much we had to do fruit stripping in those riparian areas because we couldn't do applications. And so we worked with our California Conservation Corps and got up there in ladders, and I mean, it was just an all-out effort to remove any host that may harbor the invasive species. And then again, industry, you know, I can't speak enough about how they stepped up and were attending all the industry meetings, and were really gung-ho on coordinating and making sure that the treatments were going off on a timely basis. Again, working under the direction of the UC Cooperative Extension to kind of dictate when the prime time to treat would be. And again, all the growers stepped up and saw it in their best interest to do those applications, and they did that on their own dollar with no help from the federal government or the state, and then used mating disruption in between those treatments. The mating disruption, they did get some support on that. We were able to disseminate some mating disruption, but then they also had to purchase some mating disruption on their own. Then our University of California system, our UC system, was just invaluable, again, on the timing of the flight periods, trying to figure out the life cycle of the pest. And then the USDA TWIG, providing the overall strategy recommendations. And for those that aren't aware, the Technical Working Group, or TWIG, is made up of international experts, because again, European grapevine moth was the first time in the nation, unfortunately, hit here in California. And so we really had to lean on the expertise of folks in the wine grape growing regions of other countries like Spain and France, and just to name a couple that were off the top of my head, but is made up of international experts that really helped us drive the overall strategy recommendations. And then those recommendations were adopted by the federal and state cooperative and local cooperative program, as well as the growers. So a little background on the European grapevine moth, as I alluded to, is identified as the cause of yield loss in several vineyards in Napa in the fall of 2009. The European grapevine moth and the associated botrytis infections caused complete host loss of 2 vineyards and an unacceptable tainting of the wine made from grapes from another vineyard. And so again, that was kind of an eye-opener. It was actually in the Oakville area of Napa County, and for those that are knowledgeable, that is some of the most expensive wine in the world. And so that region, the Oakville region, and so the land and the value of those grapes are extremely high. And so again, that was a huge wake-up call for the industry, and they saw the impact to them. And then traps were deployed by the California Department of Food and Agriculture, but most of the population had gone into biopause after that first fall of 2009, and so we only had a handful of moths were captured. And then the first bees Petrides had been detected in the United States. These detections were from the Oakville, Napa County region, what I just alluded to, and Oakville being a high-value area. Delimitation traps were placed in Napa and the other grape production areas in California in the spring of 2010, and then the working group with international domestic experts was formed and provided recommendations for survey, treatment, eradication, pretty much following the principles of the IPM, and helped us craft a program that ultimately was successful. We reached up to 10 counties altogether, but then as I alluded to, we shrunk that down to Napa and Sonoma counties, and then we're able to target those counties. So these are from 2010. I wanted to just kind of show the Napa County overview here, and you can see kind of some of the outliers. And so we our hypothesis on those outliers were that they were riding on grape harvest machines, and so or bins, and so those were moving around the Central Valley. In the Central Valley, we have a lot of raisin grape production or table grape production, and so you can see kind of the outliers areas there that were impacted. And again, we attribute a lot of those to the wine grape harvest equipment. And we identified that as a pathway. Again, the industry stepped up and started cleaning their equipment better, making sure that there was no hitchhikers on any of the bins if they're going to move their empty bins down to the Central Valley to, say, collect table grapes or something like that. And so that was another kind of, initially we weren't aware of the pathway, but then once we became aware of it, the industry was all over it and really stepped up to make sure that all the bins were clean, any cleaning, any materials, machines were all heavily cleaned. We also went to the extreme of doing kind of educational seminars for vineyard workers, and we would kind of come up to next to taco trucks, pay for a little advertisement on the taco trucks, and then we would do a quick little 5-minute, this is why it's important, these are the steps that you can take to help us prevent the movement of European grapevine moth, and the vineyard employees were more than happy to comply because they saw the impacts to their livelihood. And so these are just some of the counties that were impacted: the Fresno, Mendocino, Merced, Solano, San Joaquin, Santa Clara. They're all wine producing counties, and so these were the wide extent of our activities. We also had a couple other outliers in like Nevada County and some of these other little counties, but reduce those down to kind of the Napa, Sonoma area. And then the residents' response, the urban residential, you can see here some of our workers doing fruit removal, and so we had just a plethora of staff throughout the region. And so again, these are CCC workers, California Conservation Corps on the left, with our CDFA employees working hand in hand to do fruit removal. We oversaw the activities with the help of the additional labor force. So the treatments began in late March and early April. Again, the options were huge for this program. The fact that we had fruit removal for one option, or BT applications, really made it palatable for homeowners. Homeowners weren't really eligible for mating disruption. That was for the commercial operations. But again, these tools in our toolbox we would attribute to the successful eradication program. The fruit removal is preferred treatment option. By far, most of the residents were more than happy to give up their fruit for a couple of years in order to protect the overall industry. And there's a handful of residents that did want to maintain their grape production, so we just worked with them and made sure that we got treatments off on a timely manner. And again, the homeowners were gracious and understood the impacts. And then the treatments occurred in Napa and Sonoma County to the greatest extent. So on the commercial side, we had some voluntary treatments, and all the, again, industry was was huge how they stepped up and helped us with this program. We had treatment coordinators in Napa, Sonoma, Fresno, and Mendocino counties, and these individuals were just invaluable, tracking pesticide use records to determine who was treating and who wasn't. And if there was folks that weren't treating, we would work as a group to educate them on why it's important that we don't have a reservoir of European grapevine moth somewhere in the Napa Valley. So again, the treatment coordinators, I can't thank them enough. They did an excellent job. The timing of the treatments, again, based on the technical working group recommendations as well as UC Cooperative Extension's analysis of their life cycles, that was invaluable to helping us target the first and second flights of each year. And then the growers follow the UC IPM guidelines for treatment recommendations, and there's a link to that there as well. Again, this was all under the guise of the IPM and working with UC Davis to help us determine what's the most efficacious and efficient materials to utilize. And then quarantine activities, we total quarantine area is about 2,000 square miles, and then the grapes were the ultimate major host of that, and then olives were at one time a host. We determined protocols for intra and interstate movement within and from the quarantine area, because there was issues of moving some folks' grapes out of the quarantine area to be crushed, or moving into a quarantine area to be crushed. That obviously is not such a big issue, but moving out, we were able to make determinations on how to do that. And then the interstate movement, USDA's systems approach for grapes for consumption, fresh fruit for other than grapes, and then they produce some outreach materials and education as well. And then the intrastate movement, the California Department of Food and Agriculture had a master QC permit, and that was for the grapes for wine and raisins. And then we provided as much information as possible, not only on our website, but also use the University of California's website, the county's website. I mean, it was USDA. It was a comprehensive effort. The impacts were financially pretty large. European grapevine moth, as I alluded to, was the wine table, raisin, and wild grapes that were kind of the impacted commodities, except for wild grapes, not a commodity. In Napa County, approximately 131 acres in 2009 were affected, and about 179 tons were lost, which equated to loss of about fruit value of 500,000, but the wine value was, you can see, 3 million there. And then California's associated cost of the control measures was kind of nominal at this point, and then expanded as we had to do more twist ties and residential treatments. And then grower treatments were approximately about $12 million, but again, that increased as well. Some more economic impacts that, the regulated commodities included not just grapes, but olives, stone fruit. You can see the list there. It's about $6 billion altogether for those commodities. EGVM is the primary pest of economic importance to grapes, which is the #1 agricultural plant commodity grown in California. Dairy is our #1 commodity, but the plant commodity is grapes, and they have about a $4 billion a year value. And then you can see some of the counties there is up to about 10 counties altogether that were impacted. Then we were able to shrink it down to Napa and Sonoma counties, and we're able to successfully eradicate the pest. So in conclusion, and we've got about 10 minutes left, so we can open up for any questions if there are any, but the industry support was the biggest factor in this, really, that they stepped up. The 800-pound gorilla said, this is important to us. We need our elected officials to take notice, and they did. And that led to the agency cooperation where USDA, our United States Department of Agriculture, our California Department of Food and Agriculture, our county agricultural commissioners, and at the city level, the cities were highly engaged as well, all worked together, as well as I can't leave out the UC University of California system, which was just tremendous asset for this whole program. And I again can't thank enough, and also the grower liaisons were vitally important to making sure that treatments got off on a regular schedule, and then following up on individuals that lacked the treatment. And then treatments were, as I alluded to earlier, another key factor in the successful eradication. We had palatable solution sets for residents where they could either keep their grapes and use an organic treatment option of BT, or they could just lose their grapes for a couple years. And as I alluded to, vast majority of individuals opted for fruit removal. And then at the commercial level, they also had mating disruption in between treatments to help with the confusion of mating and ultimately reduce the pest population. And then it's key because we were able to have a successful trap that was able to determine where the pest was, and so again the trapping was vital, and having these good tools in our toolbox. So that's about it. I've been chit-chatting a lot here, so Rebecca, if you want to open it up for or ask if there's any questions, however you want to handle that, that'd be great.
So that was a really good presentation. It had a lot of information. It's good to see you guys are kind of coming at it from all different kinds of perspectives and methods. So if anybody would like to ask any questions now, it would be, I'll be able to read them off, and David will be able to answer them as they come in. So we have a few people still in the in attendance. So anybody have any questions about the program they're doing? Let's see. Is there anything else you'd like to add, David, while we're waiting on some questions to appear?
Let me just make sure I hit everything. Tools in our toolbox, the pest prevention system, the cooperative nature, the repairing areas was a kind of a key factor as well, trying to get in some of those tributaries and streams. The public outreach was a key component, grower liaison, industry call to action was huge. Again, the partnership. Yeah, and then the treatments, I think we pretty much hit on everything. Again, we just got really lucky with the treatments, the trapping, and the cooperative nature of the program.
Yeah, and it was, I thought it was good that you did bring up the organic industry and how that has had to be handled with the program and looked at from a little bit of a different perspective, since that's becoming a much larger section, especially in California, of the overall growing industry. I mean, a lot of people are looking for organic products, so that can impact the programs you guys are putting out there. Let's see, we do have a question.
Yeah, very.
Annie Simpson is the taco truck advertising is ingenious. Is there any way to measure its effectiveness?
Well, in my world of public outreach, I mean, that's always the hardest part, right? When I'm doing like a Don't Pack a Pest campaign or whatnot, how do you quantify those and tell the folks that are paying for the program that it's effective? I mean, I guess one way for the European grapevine moth to show that it is effective is that we eradicate it, right? All those pieces of the puzzle came together to help us eradicate it, but you can never tell, how we didn't do any surveys to follow up on it, but we knew based on the kind of local behavior of the individuals that work on the vineyards, how they would come together at certain points in the day, and so we just tried to take advantage of those opportunities to engage in language too. These were always in Spanish, and to engage the individuals and implore them to be part of the solution set, right? And that they are key in this whole thing, because they're the eyes that are out there, and if they see something, they can notify the vineyard manager right away, or so they were just really a key component to it, and can't thank them enough for all the support. And again, it's just a collaborative effort where everyone saw the importance of eradicating this pest. And initially, I got to be honest, when we had 100,000 fines, it was kind of scary. People, we didn't know how it was going to play out. But after all the education and outreach, it really was a successful program. Again, to quantify the taco truck outreach is hard, but we feel that it was an important component, and if we had to do it again, we definitely would.
Yeah. Yesterday, Lee Greenwood gave a good talk, and in it she discussed the cost of surveys and there's limiting factors to them, and just that they are a lot more costly than one would expect. So Annie had a follow-up question. Was this the first incursion of this species, or is it like the medfly, a repeat offender?
This is the first time in North America, actually, in 2009, and so not like the incursions of fruit flies. This was a first in the nation, detected it, and then just jumped on it as quickly as possible after talking to some partners in Europe and other grape growing regions to figure out the impacts. And then those growers, the video that I showed, that vineyard owner in particular, he was incredible. He raised the flag and said, hey, look, this is going to be an issue. I just lost lots of money here. And so it was, the industry itself was the one that really, got us all engaged and to the table.
Yeah, it's important to have, so many different stakeholders so that all the bases are covered. So, any additional questions from our remaining attendees? So is there anything else on the horizon, or anything else that you guys are actively working on, or your primary project?
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, there's always a lot of activities. It's kind of, I alluded to, my world is the outreach world, and so we're working on the Don't Pack a Pest at international ports of entry, trying to keep things out, and then we'll work with Florida and Texas and Hawaii, and we'll expand it to other states, and then we'll go offshore as well to get signage up in the Beijing airport, those type of things, again, try to stop the movement of it. I think the biggest thing for folks on the phone is emerging pest that we have is called the shot-hole borer. In Southern California, similar to the T-shot hole borer in Florida. However, it's just hammering. It started in avocados, then went to urban forests, and now it's settled in the riparian areas, and it's just been hammering willows and other riparian trees. And these are restoration areas as well, so the state or the feds have already put in lots of money to regenerate these areas, and then this shot hole borer comes through and within several months just devastates it. And then that incurs like arundo and other invasive species to flourish because there's none of the local habitat. So I just kind of put that on folks' radar, that the shot hole borer for us is kind of one of these emerging pests where, and it's not tied to a commodity group. So that's avocados was initially impacted agriculture, that the trees can push out those pests pretty much with the sap and those type of they're self-defensive. The avocado industry is still concerned, but not as much as they initially were, and then it went into the urban forest, and so Orange County and other counties have spent lots of money on surveying their trees, and now our U.S. Fish and Wildlife folks and California Fish and Wildlife are the latest group to be engaged on the shot hole borer because of the devastation in the riparian areas and lack of treatments near the surface water and those type of conundrums. And so that's kind of an emerging pest where we're trying to deal with that one. There's also like the South American palm weevil that's marching across the border from Southern California. I mean, it's job security, right? There's an endless amount of invasive species that could be knocking on our door. Another one is the capra beetle movement on grains that we're concerned about. We have a lot of rice production and other things here. So there's always something on the horizon, and makes for an exciting day.
Yeah, I actually saw Interpol put out I guess a press release or media release of some sort yesterday about a program they had with a bunch of different agencies, and it detailed this operation that they worked over the course of 3 weeks to seize. They had 1,300 seizures of a variety of different products, including wood, all the and some other like plant matter and animals as well. And the thing that occurred to me was that, you know, those aren't obviously going to go through any kind of inspections or checks or customs or anything like that. And I could just imagine the amount of insects or diseases or anything else that can hitchhike along with all of those natural products, I guess you could say. So you guys are doing some great work. It is good to see you guys working, like I said, with all these different groups and agencies and inspection groups to kind of keep things out. It's a lot cheaper to keep things out than to come in after they've come in.
Indeed, indeed, and it's finding the right messenger too, right? It's not always CDFA. It's not the state being the best messenger. Sometimes we partner with NGOs to help us communicate with residents. So you know that's another key component is who's the messenger and who's the recipient of that message needs to make sure that they believe in the messenger, right? And so that's why we always triangulate with these different partnerships to help spread the word to these different diverse communities here in California. It's so diverse, right? I do statewide issues, so from the north state to the south state to the east to the west, we have so many different microclimates and so many different communities throughout California. It's really a challenge, and so working with our ag commissioners and then finding those NGOs or third parties to help with these efforts has been successful.
Yep. All right. Well, I suppose on our end over here, we could let people go to lunch. I know you're just getting in for the day, being out in California. Yeah. So thank you again for giving such a great talk. And I don't think we got, you know, any lesser quality than with your being the pitch hitter here. So.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for everyone on the phone as well. And you know, please don't feel free to follow up with me if there's any questions or if we can provide any of the materials or anything like that. We'd love to share. So you know, we want to make sure other states can you know, learn from us and vice versa, and just kind of figure out the best management practices. So we always partner, and I'm also working on like a tri-state effort with Florida and Hawaii, and trying to understand our systems and how we all work together. And so there's just a lot of communication and collaboration that's happening.
Yeah, and again, this talk and the other webinars from this week will be available as we are recording them. So if you'd like to share this, if you'd like to share any of the others or view any of the other talks, be sure to check them out. And you guys have a great day.